Hey, the webinar is now live. That's so cool. Hello, everybody. All right, I'm starting to see attendees come in. It always takes a second. Zoom's got to spin up its thing. But while everybody's coming in and getting situated here, I just wanted to welcome all of you guys. Thanks for joining us this week for another edition of the Virtuous Insider. I'm excited. We don't always get to do these sessions, but we are doing our partner spotlight again this week. And I'm pleased as punch to be joined by Brandon Lyons from DonorSearch so that we can talk to you guys about some of the cool things that we do together with the integration, and also just some of the cool things you can do in DonorSearch. So if some of you are already using Virtuous and DonorSearch together, hopefully you can pick up some tips, some ways that you can use those a little bit more effectively. If you didn't know that you can use them together, I got some great news for you now that you know you can. And Brandon will talk a little bit more about that. Before we jump in, as always, just a few quick little ground rules and things we wanted to cover. So we are recording for today. This will be available in our support center afterwards. Same thing we do with all of the insider sessions. And because we are recording, we do have everybody muted. That way we can get some good, clean audio out of this. If you have a question for me or for Brandon, for both of us, please do go ahead and use the Q&A box and send that in. We're happy to hop in the chat and chat back and forth with you guys. We always like to do that. But we don't want to miss anything if it goes flying by. So if you can throw that into the Q&A box, that way we'll make sure that we don't miss that as it comes through. Okay, so for those of you who don't know me, again, my name's Scott Richards. I'm the Director of Training here at Virtuous, and I am joined by Brandon Lyons from DonorSearch. How you doing, Brandon? I should let you talk.
No, I'm doing well. You know, we're I think today's Thursday. Yes, it is. It's Thursday, so we're moving along through the week. And, you know, really honored that you would ask us to join, and happy I could be the one to actually, jump on this call with you for this webinar.
That is amazing. Excellent. You've also got a better headshot than me, so I'm a little bit jealous.
I'll send a lesser one next time.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about just how DonorSearch and Virtuous work together. I promise we don't have death by PowerPoint today. It's not tons of slides. We do want to get into both platforms and kind of look at how things work in there. But before we get into the nuts and bolts of using the integration and of using the two platforms, Brandon, I wanted to give you a chance just to kind of set the stage a little bit and talk about really the value of prospect research, right? The value of some of the data that DonorSearch can provide for the folks that maybe aren't sure what role that should play in their overall fundraising.
Absolutely. Prospect research in general, it really plays a role in every part of the development department, whether you are a grant writer, submitting proposals to foundations, a major gift officer who needs some more prospects added to their portfolio, even down to identifying and kind of segmenting who's actually a major gift prospect versus a mid-level or annual fund prospect. So, prospect research at the very high level is a great way to start segmenting your database, your donors, your prospective donors, but then also being able to, once you have that segmented, use more granular data to be able to then influence what your ask might be, influence what your messaging might be when you reach out to these folks. So there's a lot that goes into prospect research, or rather there's a lot you can get out of it. And a lot of that you can get from even like a single rating. But more likely than not, you're going to want a little bit more detail behind that in order to take your fundraising to the next level and be able to act on this data efficiently and effectively and go out there and raise the dollars that you're looking for.
Excellent. And I think the neat thing too is, prospect research and wealth data and beyond wealth data, right? I want to know who has money. I say all the time, like, I know that Jeff Bezos has money because he just shot himself into space. It doesn't mean he's going to give all that money to my org, right? I want to find folks who have that capacity and also potentially have affinity for what I do. I want to find folks and learn more about them. And I know you guys really kind of get into that, which I'm excited for folks to be able to see. But I think this really plays a part in the responsive fundraising cycle, that responsive fundraising process, which we talk about at Virtuous all the time, right? You need to be listening for donor signals. And those signals are not just, I gave you $50, but those signals also can come from doing additional research and finding out more about the types of charitable giving someone does, and then feeding that into the next response that I give to that person, letting that inform my conversation with them. Anyway,
Absolutely.
that's enough of me talking about that stuff. But let me show you guys really quickly. If you don't know of everything that's available with the DonorSearch integration in Virtuous, I want to show you that. And then I'm going to let Brandon share his screen and take us through a few things on the DonorSearch side. So here, let's flip over to Virtuous proper here. Here we go. Now, those of you that are using DonorSearch, you probably know, right? You can go to a contact record. You can search them in DonorSearch. That's I think, kind of foundational to this. But there are other ways that you can incorporate DonorSearch data into what you do in Virtuous. For example, when you configure the DonorSearch integration, you have the option to set it up to automatically add wealth data to new contacts as they get created. I don't have to go out and search somebody every time. I can start with a baseline whenever I create a new contact. One of the other things that you can do, of course, is you can incorporate this into a workflow. So if I'm going in here and I'm building a brand new workflow, or we could just use one of my existing ones here, I can create an automated workflow. And for this, let's say that as new non-donors are added to the database, I wanted to go ahead and wealth screen them. I could do that. Now, I could do that already within my settings, right? But here, maybe they're records that already exist. I just want to capture them now. Same with first-time donor. Hey, they've existed in the database for a long time. I didn't wealth screen everybody, but once they make a gift, I'm more interested in knowing now they've taken that next step. I want to start to inform what my strategy is going to be for stewarding them and for cultivating that relationship even further. I can add an action in here. And if I'm using DonorSearch, I have the ability to say, hey, go ahead and automatically append wealth data. If there's already wealth data on the record, this will do a new search and it'll update that data. So maybe I have data that's been sitting around for a while. I can go run a new search. So I can set up business rules for when I want to go out and pull in new wealth data, new signals coming from DonorSearch. And all of this data can be used in the query tool. So not only can I add this data when I'm running a workflow, but if I'm building a contact query, all of the DonorSearch data fields are available for me here in my query. So I can look at their donor rating, sure. But also in here, I mean, look at all of this, the capacity range, some of these likelihood scores, their stock value, right? Giving to other organizations across different sort of sectors, right, within the nonprofit space, political giving, all of this data is available for me to use in a query and then, of course, use to inform an automated workflow. So not only, hey, they have capacity, they tend to give to educational causes, great, that's a good fit. I want that additional signal to say, hey, let's flag this person. You need to take a deeper dive and maybe give them a phone call as opposed to just sending them a thank you letter. Okay. Now, in any record, like we said, you can, here, let's pull up, now Oliver Queen's fake. I don't really think we're going to get a lot of great wealth data on him. But hey, I mean, Green Arrow is Green Arrow. You got to go with him.
Right.
Yeah. Gotta love Ollie. But on any contact record, if I've got the DonorSearch integration enabled, I'm going to see this little box in here that says, hey, go ahead and get wealth data. That'll go out and run a search. And once I run that search, that's going to populate. So here's Mark. There's a little bit more data available on him out there in the public sphere. A little bit. But if I go out and run that search, then I'm going to see this type of data come back. So it's going to tell me about their donor rating and their capacity range. And if all we gave you was this stuff, I mean, that would be great. I could use that to inform what I'm going to do. But I can also go ahead and view all of the wealth data. And this is the real depth and breadth of fields that are coming back from DonorSearch. all of the stuff we just saw scrolling through the query tool, it's all available here for me to dive into and use. Now, the view donor search profile, that actually takes me out of Virtuous. It takes me into DonorSearch to start to dig through a profile. So, Brandon, I think that is what they call a natural segue to
absolutely.
pass it over to you. I can stop my screen share here, and you want to take us through a few things in DonorSearch proper?
Absolutely.
That is awesome, sir. All right. I've given you.
Here we go. And to keep with that continuity, just so happen to have Mark Cuban pulled up here.
Look at that, like we're professionals.
And so the Virtuous integration is leveraging everything from this profile at a summary level, but there's a lot of granular data that's feeding into those summary data points. And as you saw Scott explain, something like a DS rating or just a donor score in general can be very key. And to go back to like my first comments, segmentation. When you first come into any type of research, you want to look for that score that tells you what kind of donor you're actually looking at. In this case, a DS1-1 is someone that's made a $5,000 gift to a nonprofit in the past. And that kind of takes us to that natural place where we say, okay, we know we have a wealthy person. We know we have someone that's given to us. But the first thing that's going to indicate that this person might make a gift again, or whether or not a first-time donor or a prospect might make a gift, have they given in the past? Like someone who's given in the past, way more likely to then turn around and make the next gift to either that same nonprofit or a new nonprofit. So being able to identify that outside giving it's kind of bar none to anything else. Like Scott said, it's great. We know they have the capacity, but now do they have the inclination? Ooh, excuse me. And so if we stick with the DS rating here for a second, we think about that $5,000 gift. That's a nice size gift really for any nonprofit. It doesn't matter if you're a startup or if you are, the largest hospital system in the country. $5,000 is still meaningful, but it means even more than just that dollar amount. Things like this, we do a lot of research, and there's a lot of research done in the nonprofit space around all of the giving that happens. And we find that a $5,000 gift makes someone almost 10 times more likely to make that gift again and then start making larger gifts. So you can glean this type of intelligence just from a single DS score or just a wealth score in general, because we're if that particular vendor, in this case DonorSearch does, is looking at that past charitable giving, it's going to give us a better idea of what we can expect to get from them again. If we kind of move down into the profile, I know we're limited on time here, but the DS rating, we have ask amounts based off of things like the single largest gift that we found them make. So, being able to understand a donor's philanthropic ceiling can help us understand whether or not that is, what is a realistic ask amount for us. Now, obviously, if Mark was never a donor to us and this is his first time, reaching out to our organization, we're not going to ask him for $1 million the first time we talk to him. But we know that if we can get him excited enough over, a cultivation and stewarding process, we might be able to get him to that gift amount or something close. So it really helps to set benchmarks to what you want to work towards when you are, working with your prospects and or donors. And so if we start diving into the profiles, the type of intelligence that you can get from, any type of wealth screening or philanthropic review platforms like this, is actually being able to look at the transactional gifts, being able to know when someone donated last can definitely influence whether or not you were going to get that large gift this year. You see someone come out and give a large $1 million gift and it just happened this year. I don't know that another one's going to go out. So maybe that's a prospect you kind of keep stewarding, you talk to them, and you set up that opportunity for the next year or the end of the year if it happened earlier in the year. Just be aware of your donor fatigue, and information like this can definitely help with that. Even beyond that, things like political giving. Political giving, while I know some organizations either ethically or legally can't use it, we still provide it because we know there are organizations that can, and we don't provide this in order, and we don't say to use this information to try to make an ask. but we use it to just identify that it's a marker of philanthropy. It's something that indicates that somebody is more inclined to make a donation to nonprofits. So understanding that someone actually has given politically before, it's almost as good as knowing that they've given charitably to a nonprofit. It's just another avenue to identify the prospect. Of course, understanding that someone is wealthy and what makes them wealthy, things like real estate. And of course, Mark he's wealthy. We know he's wealthy. The home is a compound that sits on its own city block. We get it. Mark has money. But at the end of the day, if he never gives it away, that house means nothing to us unless we are the one nonprofit about to get, an estate gift or bequest, something like that. So, understanding they're wealthy is nice, but something like knowing they have a grant giving foundation, that type of information can be extremely helpful, because you might have a donor who you've been working with, and, you get $100, you get $500, you get $1,000 the next year, but based off their capacity, they could do more. You might find out that the foundation, in this case, it's a namesake foundation or a family foundation, is where he gives away his big bucks. And that's how they like to be approached. This is another philanthropic avenue that you can, or philanthropic vehicle rather, that you can use to go out and get the gift that you're looking for from a particular prospect. It might not be from the individual, but that individual can influence, whether or not you're going to get that grant. You still have to go through the proposal process and everything like that. But, understanding that we could turn around and get a 6-figure gift from his foundation versus maybe getting that $1,000, even $5,000 gift from him personally, there's a big difference there. We want to make sure we are maximizing our time and our efforts to get the maximum amount of dollars we can get to help further our cause and our mission for our nonprofits. And I'm not going to jump into every single database, but I do want to come down a little bit further and touch on things like whether or not they are connected to businesses. Of course, business is going to identify, why they are so wealthy. But again, this could lend itself to other opportunities for your nonprofit. If, in the case of Mark Cuban, if you are, let's say, a nonprofit that deals with youth development and maybe recreational sports, and you're in Texas, if Mark is a donor or a prospective donor, and we figure out that, he is the owner of the Dallas Mavericks, imagine what a field trip with all the kids to go meet, a Dallas Mavericks player or go see a game could do. Or even getting corporate sponsorship from that company, what that could do for you. So making sure that you understand all of the possibilities that you have when working with your prospects or donors, and understanding that it's not always just about getting the check or getting, that gift of stock. There's other ways that, an individual can help your nonprofit and really make a big impact for you. And even to that point, if we think about things like, where is it? No, I don't want that. My apologies. Did it not populate here? Apparently it didn't. Oh, here we go. So even things like, we've been talking a lot about money. We've been talking about going out and getting a gift, but a lot of times it's hard to make that connection with a prospect. It's hard to break the ice. Things like biographical data that, wealth screening and prospect research can provide can help you understand and learn who the person is beyond the dollar signs. Being able to know that Mark got his start selling garbage bags door to door. That is a very interesting story. It's something you can bring up to them, if you ever get the chance to have an in-person meeting. And it's something that helps break the ice. It lets you know that you see them as another person and not just another donor, because they are a donor, but they're a person first. So, understand who they are and understand how they came to be, because that could definitely influence, one, the types of nonprofits that they give to, and then two, whether or not they're in a position to actually make a gift to your nonprofit based on how they made their money. And then a big part of prospect research is actually understanding relations. And so what we're able to do with prospect research is identify, not just every single person who's going to be working for the Dallas Mavericks, but also these are more so C-suite level executives and board members, other folks that Mark would actually know. And so this could lend itself to some peer-to-peer work. If Mark is a huge advocate of your nonprofit, and he gives to you often, this is a group of like-minded people that Mark knows and could potentially introduce you to. And then here you've used one of your stronger donors to potentially bring in another donor that could be just as strong as Mark there. So being able to, understand those relationships can be very helpful as well. It can be helpful with getting, the board involved, because if you think about your board and going and asking them, hey, do you know any of these folks? And you give them a list of 200 people, they might scan it and then say, not really. But if we can come back to them and say, hey, do you know any of these, 7 or 8 people? Because we're trying to go talk to Mark. They'll say, hey, actually, I know Ronnie. Ronnie and I sit on the board of a bank down the street. I'd be more than happy to make the introduction. So we can use this section, and you can use this information in 2 different ways, either that peer-to-peer approach and having your donor kind of advocate for you and reach out, or using their connections in hopes that we can get get connected to Mark if we haven't spoken to him before. And I know we're getting a little close to time. I don't know if we need to leave some time for Q&A. Scott, let me know how I'm doing on time.
I think you're doing great, number one. So good job. I haven't seen open questions coming in, which is great. If you guys have questions, go ahead and send them in. I had one question that I wanted to ask, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it's related to political giving. Now, it's been a while since I've been in the prospect research space, so maybe some of my stuff is rusty here. But I know you mentioned that there are some restrictions on using political giving. Now, my understanding was that was based on whether you are identifying someone as a prospect versus whether they're already a donor and you're trying to research them.
Correct.
Right. So do you want to talk a little bit more about that distinction so that everybody I don't want everybody to be afraid of political giving. It's like you said, it's still useful, but it's really the difference between creating a prospect list versus if they're already a donor, then that data is a little bit more usable. Is that right?
It is. And I think not the exact law, but the terminology that we hear the most often is it is illegal to use a political gift as a reason to solicit a new donor. So if they're already in your CRM, they're already in Virtuous, they're either a donor or a prospect, you can use that data, but you're not using it to solicit them. You're using it to identify them. It's more of an identifier than a reason to reach out to them. And so that's typically how we say to use the data. And honestly, if we look at it, it's helpful to understand that they give politically, but also to understand which side of that they kind of fall to. Understand who your donor is. Sometimes we call this section the keep your foot out of your mouth section. Not that we want the conversation to go to politics, but if it does, know who you're talking to. And so, it can be very helpful in that way as well. Definitely if it's already a donor of yours or a prospect and they're in your CRM, don't be afraid of that political data. It can be very helpful. And for the very wealthy and sometimes very guarded people, and when I say guarded, I mean people that are good at hiding their assets, and maybe they're using DABs, donor advised funds, to hide their charitable giving. They can't hide political giving, which is why we focus on it. The FEC and the state giving departments do not play around with those donations, and they have to report all of that. So it's one of the surefire ways that we can identify someone and understand if they've been charitable politically, then they're more than likely to be charitable to nonprofits as well. And actually, there's a stat, and it's if they have given away $15,000 to federal political giving in their lifetime, it is a 1-to-1 correlation that they make 5, 6, and 7-figure gifts charitably. So if someone was purely giving through a donor advised fund, and we saw $15,000 or more in their lifetime giving politically, almost guaranteed that they have made large gifts to nonprofits. We just can't see them. They were anonymous. They went through a trust or a donor advised fund, things like that.
And that's a good point too, because there's always going to be data that you can't see, right? We're seeing the part of the iceberg that's still above the water, and then trying to extrapolate meaning from all of that. Right. But if someone is good at hiding their data, they're good at hiding their data. Yeah,
exactly. And there's not much you can do about it besides going and asking them. You just have to take the plunge and say, hey, we would love to speak with you. Internally, that you've seen maybe just the political giving and you're curious. To them, you just seem like an interested nonprofit reaching out and wanting to learn more about them and seeing, whether or not they will be willing to support your organization. So, you can take, with any data, take it with a grain of salt because it is data. Nothing is 100% accurate. But at the same time, what are we going to do without this data? You cannot be out here and fundraising effectively if you don't have at least some sense of who this person is outside of what they've been doing with your organization.
Yeah, and I think the other thing I've experienced, at least in my time in the space too, is that when you get a Mark Cuban, right? You get someone who has significant assets and they've probably made it through business. There is a bit of an expectation that you have done your homework, right? If you came in and you talked to them and you didn't know some of this stuff about them, you didn't know their business, you didn't know some of the other giving, they kind of look at you and go, what are you guys doing? Right? It's not a weird thing to them because they've been doing market research for the last 20, 30 years. Like they get that idea really, really well.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. Awesome. Absolutely. That's a great point. Yeah.
Man, and I know this goes, there's so much we could probably talk about the DS score for the next 30 minutes and take apart 1-1 versus 1-2. I'm not going to make you do that, but we could. There's so much to learn. Now, I will say to everybody who's on, if you have questions related to some of the stuff that you're seeing today in terms of donor search, if you have questions related to, hey, there's certain things I didn't know I could do in the platform that Brandon just did in like 10 minutes, reach out to your account manager at Virtuous. Let them know we can connect you with the donor search team. They're pretty good. They're nice and friendly. And we can get you in contact with them so that if you do have specific questions, they can help you out. Now, for anybody that is a donor search client right now, Brandon, is there a certain way that they should reach out for questions or support directly to you guys if it's related to their donor search account?
Yeah, they would reach out directly to their client support rep. The moment that they got donor search, they were assigned reps, and their rep is most likely going to be Stuart Entwistle. So, if that name is not familiar to you, get familiar with it because he handles all of our Virtuous clients as far as getting them onboarded and showing them what the breadth of what is possible with the integration as well as our full online tool. So that would be their client support rep, which is most likely Stuart. And if it's not, the moment that they mention Virtuous, they'll get transferred to Stuart.
And it's okay to get transferred to Stuart. By the way, he's a good guy.
He is. We like Stuart.
Hands. Excellent. Well, hey, if you don't mind, I'll take the screen share back. I have a couple things I just wanted to touch on to wrap us up for this week. And then if you guys do have additional questions, you can send those in. We try to get them in under the wire. I saw one question come in the chat that was related to something that sounds like a support issue. And so I will follow up with you. Totally fine. And, you can also, again, reach out to our support team. You can reach out to your account manager here at Virtuous if you've got some specific questions and you want to follow up with us on anything that you're seeing when you're logged in, when you're using donor search, et cetera. But I just wanted to really quickly make sure that everybody knows you can tune in next time, right? We do this every week now, which is kind of cool. Next week, we'll be doing our next Product Pulse session. So we'll have Jason Van Loo joining us. I know in our last release, we actually unveiled our public roadmap for the first time so folks can start voting on new features. So we'll talk a little bit about that, a little bit about some of the new features that came out, and of course, what's next. And as always, we would love to hear your feedback, your thoughts, your questions in that session. So make sure that you join us for that. And as always, I like to leave everybody with some words from someone smarter than me. And I do seem to have a theme lately where we keep jumping on to authors. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I like books. But I just thought this is a great way to talk about prospect research, right? Because research is formalized curiosity. And it's poking and it's prying, but with a purpose. And I think that this really, really spoke to me because here, when we do this research, right, Brandon, you said it. Right? We're not just doing this research to say, I want to get more dollars, but we're doing that to support our mission. We're doing that to support our cause. And we're doing that because we want to find somebody who has wealth, but also a desire to do some good. And we want to connect them with our beneficiaries and let them do some good for them. And that's really what we're trying to do when we dig in and do this research.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I just saw one last comment in the chat there.
Oh yeah.
And it was someone asking about the link to get to the donor search profile. When you initially run that search, you will not see the button for view profile, but if you click the refresh that's on that actual section, the actual well screening section, that should bring up the second button that allows you to jump into the profile. If not, then Scott, would you be the person to reach out to for that, or would it be their rep?
Yeah, well, our support team would be the first place to go.
Okay.
For sure. By the way, we really, you can tell we get along well because Brandon's offering support on our product in UI, which is amazing. But yeah, I know that there are some cases where, especially if someone had sort of the previous iteration of the DonorSearch integration, that was not bringing over those profile links. A bulk screening may not have had those profile links, especially some previous ones. But like you said, hey, if you refresh that data, A, you're going to get new data, which is nice. And then B, that should also give you that profile link. If you still don't see it, then again, just let us know. Excellent. Any parting thoughts? Any wisdom you want to leave us with, Brandon, of your own here?
Honestly, yeah. Actually, it's like, so not so much wisdom, but more so gratitude, just for nonprofits in general. I've been in this space for over 6 years now, and before that 6 years, I had no idea the breadth of this space and how much good was actually being done. And getting to meet so many people, within this space, I'm gratefully thankful to all nonprofits. My family has benefited from nonprofits. My father, he had throat cancer, and donations made to University of Maryland, where he got treatment, were one of the reasons why we were able to get him treatment, because that treatment is expensive. And so, I have yet another newfound love for this nonprofit sector and all the work that you all do.
That is awesome. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Brandon. Number one. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And hopefully I'll see all of you again next week.
He is doing well. Yep. He's been 10 years, 10 years cancer-free. So actually 12 years now. So yep, I appreciate that.
That is amazing. We had our own family battles with that, and I know it's tough. And see, look at that. We got such nice people here. They're wishing you well.
Right.
Thanks, everybody.
I'll definitely come back. Take care, everyone.